Hello, hi, welcome to our session today for Twitter for Journalists, the power of public conversation. As we come together today, I'd like to start by acknowledging the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation as traditional owners and custodians of the country I'm speaking with you from today. I recognise their continuing connection to these lands and waters as the oldest continuous culture in the world, and I thank them for caring for and protecting this coastline and its ecosystems. I pay my respects to elders past and present, and I extend that respect to all First Nations people present today. And I'd also like to acknowledge and pay respects to the traditional owners of the lands each of you are on today. This always was and always will be Aboriginal land. I'd like to thank also our hosts of the Walkleys for partnering with us on this latest session. We have a really packed agenda for you today. So if we switch to the next slide, I'll just kick off with a quick intro to our team. So my name is Tahlia, my pronouns are she, her, and I'm a member of the public policy team at Twitter. You'll also be hearing from our comms team, Twitter Curation, and from Global Content Partnerships today. And if we just go to the next slide, I'll take you through our agenda. First, a quick spot of housekeeping. We are recording today's session and it will be available through the Walkleys at a later date. Please ensure that your microphone is on mute throughout the session. We will be running a Q&A at the end, so please do drop all of your questions in the chat and we will answer them then. Today's session is under Chatham House rules and it is focused more on being a practical workshop for journalists and newsmakers. But if you do have any questions about Twitter or about any of the materials that we go through today, for any stories you're working on, we will have the details of our communications team and how you can contact them and make a press inquiry later in the slides. Now to our agenda. So today we'll be walking you through a variety of different elements of Twitter for News. We'll start with Rose, who will give you a bit of an overview on the latest of Twitter's audience and what you should know, as well as some of the latest products that you can use in newsmaking, and some practical examples of how we've started to see this really play out in Twitter this year. We'll then head over to Twitter Curation, who will be taking you through Twitter Moments 101 and how to make the best moments possible on Twitter. I will then be taking you through a bit of an update on conversational health on Twitter, as well as our latest safety tools. And then we'll hand over to Ben and the comms team, who will be speaking about everyone's favourite topic, verification, as well as how to work with Twitter comms before we head into that Q&A. Next slide, please. All right, well, without further ado, I will hand over to the lovely Rose, who will be telling you more about Twitter for News.
Hey, everybody. Nice to see you all there. As Tiles has said, thank you, Tiles. My name is Rose. I'm from Global Content Partnerships. This is my 4th Walkleys event. So if you're new, hello and welcome. If you're a repeat person coming through to all of these Walkleys events, thank you again. And there's fresh information here for you as well. So let's dive in. Twitter is what's happening and it's what people are talking about right now. We're the undisputed home for breaking news and real-time public conversation. This spans across sports, news, entertainment, music, technology, gaming, business, cultural shifts, and much, much more. Next slide, please. So let's just touch on the Twitter audience quite briefly. So Twitter's superpower has always been our active leaned-in audience. Next slide, please. What we've seen over the last 3 years is that more and more people are tuning into Twitter than ever before. According to our Q4 earnings, we now have 217 million monetizable daily active users, which is a 13% increase year on year. Our ambition is to get to 315 million people coming to Twitter every day by 2023. Next slide, please. So as our audience grows, so too does the engagement on our tweets. So the question is, when is the news audience in Australia engaging with tweets? So when looking at 4 major news accounts in Australia, we can see that followers are most likely to engage with tweets from those accounts between 7 to 10 p.m. at night, Sunday through to Thursday. Mondays having the highest engagement throughout the day. If you have a project that you're working on, you might use this data to help guide you on when best to tweet it out, or even use our schedule tweet tool to access your audience when they are their most engaged. Next slide, please. Now moving on to 2 of our tools, which might be quite valuable to you, and we'll start with Spaces. So in order to serve a truly global conversation, we need to expand access to everyone. This means offering people more ways they can participate in the conversation beyond those 280 characters. So hopefully by now you've seen a Twitter space on the app, and this is where the live audio conversations are happening. There's a space for just about every topic. Some are very small and intimate, others have millions of listeners, and they range across sport, music, gaming, entertainment, pretty much everything. So on the next slide, we have a video for you all to see on how spaces work. Spaces can be used as a tool for organisations as well as individuals like yourself. Organisations can use the tool to bring people together and to inform. In this example, you can see a reporter from Crikey News using Spaces to live broadcast updates from Clive Palmer's address at the National Press Club. Journalists and individuals can use Spaces this way, but what we've also seen around the world are Spaces being used to connect with people on the ground, so to find sources and to fill quotes and content for your reporting. Next slide. So there's been a few updates. As of December last year, we listened to the feedback and we made some adjustments. So you can now have up to 13 speakers at any given time. This includes 1 host and 2 co-hosts. And a big update, you can now record your Spaces and keep them on your Twitter account for replay. Spaces are now also available to everyone to create, host, speak, or just listen on your mobile. And so on the next slide, we'll go through how to start a space. And it's actually pretty easy. So the first thing you need to do is just update your app on your phone. And then all you do after that is click into the app. If you long press on the compose button, you'll see a purple Spaces icon. Just click on that. From there, you'll give your space a title so people know what they're listening to and they click in. And then you can also toggle to record if you wish to do so. Then you can add up to 3 topic associations. So this allows people or helps people to discover your space. So if your space is about a trending topic or a trending hashtag or something, quite unique in the news, make sure you're searching for that topic and aligning it to your space. And then once you've done that, you just click start or schedule. So if your space is something that can be scheduled and doesn't have to happen live in the moment, we do recommend it, as we have seen more people tuning into scheduled spaces. And now moving on to review. So review is a service that makes it easy to start and publish editorial newsletters. Next slide, please. So you can use the tool to increase your readership across your Twitter audience. By enabling people to bring their best content to the platform, connecting captive audiences with the most relevant content, and empowering everyone to start or participate in conversations about what they're discovering, We're making Twitter a more rewarding place for people and publishers. Next slide. If you've connected your Twitter account to Review, you can show your newsletter near the top of your Twitter profile where your followers can easily subscribe. But there are other ways for people to subscribe to your newsletter from Twitter without you having to update your settings. So when someone tweets a link to a review profile or issue, people who see that tweet in their timeline can subscribe right from that tweet. Even better, if that person already has an email address linked to their Twitter account, all it takes is one click. So there's no need for them to reconfirm the subscription via email or anything else. And so that's it from me. Hopefully you've learned something new. And if you have questions, please just throw them in the comments. And then at the end of all of this, there'll also be an email address which goes directly to me and my colleague Ian Wheeler. So if there's anything we can't answer for you today, I will be sure to get back to all of your emails. And yeah, I'll hand it over to Pete.
Thanks, Rose. Hi, everyone. My name's Pete Thompson, and I'm desk lead for Curation here in Australia. And today I'm going to talk to you about how you can make the most of moments on Twitter. To the next slide. And we can go to the next one. Yeah, that's it. So yeah, firstly, I just wanted to give you a little background on Curation at Twitter. So we're a global team curating content for multiple markets in many different languages. And like the news cycle, we're a 24/7, 365 days a year operation. And it's our job to add context to the biggest and most impactful conversations and content happening on the platform. So this can be breaking news like the ongoing floods on the East Coast, major events like the Australian Open or Mardi Gras. It can be about sharing accurate information from authoritative sources about elections or important news events like the war in Ukraine. And of course, it's also about explaining all the weird and wonderful things that happen on Twitter, like the memes and the trending conversations. Next slide. So here's some of the surfaces where you'll find curated content on Twitter, but you'll likely know us best from the Trends tab. There you'll see curated headlines and descriptions or tweets attached to trends to help explain why that term is trending. And you may also be familiar with moments, which can be seen in the bottom right of this slide. And that's what we're going to focus on today. Next slide. So what are moments? Onto the next slide. So moments are curated, they're a curated storytelling format that highlights informative tweets, videos, images, and GIFs around a certain conversation or event. Next slide. They can be found in the Explore tab, which on your Twitter app is the magnifying glass at the bottom. On desktop, you'll see a tab on the left labeled #Explore. Next slide. So as well as the curation team, moments can also be made by partner organizations, and these can be submitted to the curation team for review. They're assessed according to our standards and then considered for featuring in the Explore tab themselves. So why should you use moments? So moments are a unique way for you to highlight your tweets, your work, or your journalists, and package that in an engaging way. So it's primarily a storytelling tool, and you can use it to tell stories and inform your audience about things that are important to you and to them. And you can control how that information is presented and shared. You can also use moments to show your expertise. So maybe one of your journalists has shared an informative thread analyzing an important issue. Moments are a great way to package and share that informative context. Maybe something's trending that no one understands, a meme or some niche celebrity news, but you or your team have expertise in that area. You can create a moment to help your audience feel informed about that. You can also use moments to be part of the conversation. Look at what's trending and add to that conversation. Maybe you are the conversation. Maybe you started a trending hashtag. you could create a moment that uses your own tweets and includes reactions from people on Twitter who are engaging with it. You can use moments to own your exclusives. So it's an opportunity to share your stories with additional context. So as a journalist, you could tweet a thread about an important story you're working on with some exclusive content or maybe some extra insights, and then link to that moment with link to that article within your moment. And finally, moments will allow you to reach an audience who don't already follow you and can help you access different markets and perspectives. On to the next slide, thanks. So what goes into creating an engaging moment? So the best titles are a succinct summary of the topic. They're engaging and informative and ideally avoid clickbait. They can be less than 10 words and should be simply written in the active tense. Next slide. The best descriptions are about 2 sentences long, and they include the key facts and any attribution or context that's needed to make the story work. Pro tip, bullet points don't format well in moments. So if you want to use bullet points, you should put them in a tweet, and then you can include that tweet at the top of the moment. Let's have a quick look at covers. So the best cover images or videos work across different crops. So you want to keep your image, the key parts of your image centered so they don't get cropped out. They should be eye-catching, but also always relevant to the story. Another pro tip, if you're using a GIF or a video, you want to make sure that the frame that is selected tells the story. And your cover images or videos should be reflective of the mood or content within that moment without showing bias or taking sides. The best tweets to include within your moment are credible. They come from the original source and scene. We know there's a lot of that content available on platforms, so it's important to use it. The tweets in the moment should be representative of different voices and perspectives, and you should fill them with context, analysis, and relevant details. And just a few additional best practices to help you make your moments stand out. So you always want to make sure you're developing a strong narrative in the way you structure the tweets within the moment. It might seem obvious when you're telling a story, but it's really important to have a beginning, middle, and end, rather than just gather a random assortment of tweets in the moment. Make sure you're telling a full story to keep users engaged. You should try and go beyond the headlines and pick a different angle that adds additional context or analysis to a story. So if, for example, there was major breaking news tomorrow and Scott Morrison called the election, the curation team would create a moment providing real-time updates on that. But there's definitely opportunities for media organizations or journalists to create moments that go deeper into that story and maybe explain what the next steps are or what we can expect from the election to give that extra context to your audiences. 8 to 12 tweets are about enough to tell the story and keep users engaged. But if it needs to be longer and it's appropriate, then that's okay. You should always make sure you're accurately reflecting the conversation that you're highlighting and making sure, again, to use diverse perspectives and all the voices that are on Twitter. And then always make sure to share your work. So once you publish your moment, tweet it from your accounts. You can also pin it to the top of your profile. On to the next slide, thanks. So I'll just finish by quickly explaining how to make a moment. Next slide, please. So I won't go into step-by-step detail. We can share some of the resources after this session, but it's fairly straightforward. You just need to navigate to the Moments tab via your navigation bar. This is only on desktop. So just on the left-hand side of twitter.com, you want to click on the 3 dots at the bottom of the navigation bar, and that will reveal the Moments tab. Click into that, then click the Create button to start a new moment. Add a title and a brief description, and then select the tweets you'd like to include. And there's a few ways you can do this. You can select from tweets that you've liked previously. You can select from certain accounts. You can search directly for the tweet if you have the URL, or you can create a collection of tweets in TweetDeck and import that directly into your moment. You then just have to arrange them in the correct order to tell your story, add your cover image, and then publish your moment and tweet it out. Next slide. And then once you've published it, you can send your moments to either of these emails if you'd like the curation team to consider it for featuring in the Explore tab. And we look forward to hearing from you. That's everything from me. And so I'll pass you back over to Tahlia.
Thanks so much, Pete. As mentioned, I will be telling you a little bit more today about our conversational health journey and specifically also a range of our safety tools. So if we can go to the next slide, please. You might have heard us say many, many times before that Twitter's mission is to serve the public conversation. And online safety is essential to fulfilling that mission. And it's a top priority for us as a company. We're an open service that's home to a world of different people, perspectives, ideas, and information. And we're committed to making Twitter a service where diverse voices are empowered to participate. And health and safety is really at the center of being able to do that. So this is a commitment that we made as a company a couple of years ago, just to refresh. And I'm going to tell you a little bit more about what we mean about conversational health and how we're working to build inclusive and authentic conversations on Twitter, because inclusive and authentic conversations is really where the magic of Twitter happens. Next slide, please. So our policies, what you'll see on the slide here is an overview of what the Twitter rules are. So our Twitter rules make clear what is and isn't allowed on Twitter. And I'll go into a little bit more detail in further slides around how to report things that might violate these rules. But you'll see that they focus on a couple of key areas, from authenticity to privacy to abuse and hateful conduct. And we do have the link there to our Twitter Help Center, where you can read more about these policies in full detail and what does and does not violate them. But I'm going to, if we go to the next slide, I'm actually going to focus today on something that I am incredibly passionate about, and that is Twitter safety tools, and making sure that people know what tools are available to them so they can have more control over the conversations that they have on Twitter. Next slide, please. Mute, let's start with mute. So we have a variety of different muting capabilities on Twitter. You are able to mute things at a conversation level, at an account level, and even at a keyword and a hashtag level. So this is something or a tool that is available to you when you're not really at the level where you want to completely restrict access through something like blocking, but you might just want to take a bit of a break. Or you might just find the conversation that you're getting tagged into a little bit irrelevant to you at that day. If you toggle into your settings, there are abilities to actually mute things at a keyword level. This can be really great as well if there is a heavy topic potentially trending in the news and you want to take a break from that in your timeline. You can set that up and you can keep it in place for as long as you want, whether that's a couple of hours, a couple of days, or forever. As you'll see here, you can also mute a conversation directly from a tweet. So if you're in a conversation and you don't want to really be getting notifications for it anymore, you can click those three little dots, and in the drop-down menu, there will be an ability to mute that conversation. And then you'll no longer be getting notifications about it. If you do mute an account as well, you will still get notifications if they mention you or if they send you DMs. So you should keep that in mind as well. And just another little aside, you can also use mute as a way to try to filter out TV spoilers. So if that's a thing that was very, very popular around Game of Thrones days, people would mute all of the keywords of character names or the series itself to also keep that out of their timeline. Next slide, please. But if something is getting a little bit too much or you don't want to interact with an account at all, you have the opportunity and the ability to block that account. So if, yes, as you can see here, you can do that at a tweet level or at a profile level. And that person or that account will no longer be able to have a conversation with you on Twitter. Although you should keep in mind when you do this, that person or account will be able to see that you have blocked them. A muted account won't be able to tell that you've muted them. But if you have blocked an account, if they then try to interact with you, they will get a notification that they are blocked, which is why they no longer have access to you. Next slide, please. So I mentioned reporting. Anything that is or might be potentially in violation of the Twitter rules can either be reported via the variety of help center forms that are available at the link that I shared earlier, and we will also share that in the chat and a bit later in the presentation, so you have it for reference. But they can also be reported at a tweet level. So if you see something that you think shouldn't maybe be on Twitter, again, click those little 3 dots and you will see in that drop-down menu the ability to report the tweet. You'll then get a reporting flow, which will ask for a little bit more information about how it might violate the Twitter rules. And from there, you'll also then get a final prompt from the Twitter app, which will give you the ability to directly either block or mute the account related to the content you are reporting. From there, you will get emails from Twitter support that are connected to your Twitter account that will let you know more about the result of the case that you've reported. Next slide, please. So this one is really good for journalists. I always really want people to know that you have the ability to filter your notifications, and this can really help if you've got a story that's performed particularly well or is getting a lot of retweets and is starting to get maybe a little bit more conversation than you might typically have on your account. You have the ability, if you go into your account settings, to have a variety of different toggles, as indicated here, that are advanced filters on what kind of accounts you'll get notified about. So as you can see, that's everything from you can choose to no longer get notified about accounts that you don't follow, or a number of profile signals. So whether that is accounts that don't have a profile photo, that hasn't confirmed some of their key information on their account, or even new accounts. So you can toggle as many of these on and off, again, for however long you want that to be in place. But it is just a really good one to have in mind about how to handle your mentions. The other thing that I will note is that you have the ability to also filter notifications by keywords as well. So if you don't want to be notified about tweets that might be related to a certain topic, you also have the ability to filter your mentions and your notifications in that way. On to the next slide, please. Secondary inbox. So if you're using Twitter as a journalist, you probably have open DMs for tips or for sources or for people to communicate with you about potential stories. It's one thing that's really valuable, as Twitter is an open platform. But also, I know that not everyone wants to be flooded necessarily with messages from people that they don't know. So I use Twitter for my work as well, and I have open DMs, but one thing that I found incredibly valuable is having this secondary inbox turned on. So if you have open DMs, you can enable it so that all messages that come from an account that you don't already follow will get filtered automatically into a secondary inbox called a request folder. From there, you're able to look at what the message is, and only once you have said, yes, I accept this message, will that account holder then be able to actually interact with you and contact you. Or if you deny that request, then they will not be able to actually interact with you via DMs. And we've got a key stat there. So when we introduced this, we did actually see that it resulted in a 20% decrease in these conversations that might result in a block. So it's a really useful little tool. Next slide, please. Hide replies. So we introduced this a couple of years ago, and I actually really love the way we described it, which is that it is the tool that is for reply guys. So it's not something that is resulting in you necessarily wanting to block an account or even mute an account, but the replies just might be a bit annoying or they're off topic, and you want to stick to a particular kind of conversation. So you can actually go through, select the little 3 dots on the tweets, on these replies, and you can choose to actually hide replies. What this will do is that it will put whatever replies you've selected to have this option into a secondary almost section of your replies down at the very bottom, and they'll be interstitialed. So it will say view hidden replies. So we do still have that transparent open nature of Twitter as a service. Those comments aren't deleted. But if people want to go see those, they're going to have to go scroll down, specifically click through and then read the hidden replies. It's just a good way to be able to keep your conversation on track. And it's just another tool in the tool belt, really. Next slide, please. Another option that is sort of available in this in conversation settings sort of suite of tools is conversation settings, which enable you to actually choose who can reply to your tweets. So you might have already seen this, you might have already used it. But basically, when you go to tweet, you'll have the option to select everyone as the audience or who can reply to your tweet, people you follow, or only people you mention. And while this can give you more control over who is replying, you can also actually use it in a pretty creative way to interact with other accounts. So for example, say as a news organization, you wanted to interview an account. If you select only people you mention, then you'll be able to have a conversation and interact with that account, and it will be available and transparent on Twitter for people to see, but you're going to be able to keep it completely on message and on track. So while people can interact with it, they're not going to be able to take it into another direction. And again, it's another tool kind of for those reply guys. But yeah, as you'll see, you can engage, you can interact with an audience of your choice, or you can host a panel or an interview discussion on Twitter with this tool, or you can just simply use it as a way to have more control and reduce interruptions in what you're tweeting. Next slide. And we have recently updated this, so you can change who can reply, manage who can reply, even after you've tweeted. So it used to be that you had to select that from the outset, and that was what your tweet was. You selected the audience or the who could reply, and that was it. But we heard feedback as we were iterating and testing on this product about how it would be most useful. And it also was, it was sort of brought to our attention that the way that this could also be really helpful is if people suddenly are getting a spark of interest, or, a story is getting a lot of attention and they're starting to get a lot of replies, they can also manage who can reply to that conversation at a later date. So if you, again, click those 3 little dots, the 3 little toggles, you'll get a drop-down menu, and you will have the option to change who can reply to your tweet at a later date. Next slide, please. And again, just to reiterate on this as a tool, it's a really fantastic tool. So I've given it 3 whole slides. But at the core of it, what it is, it's transparent conversation signals. So people still understand what's happening. They can see what you've selected, and they can still see the conversation that's happening, but it's really putting you into having more control over what you're tweeting and who can have a conversation with you at any given point. Next slide, please. Here's an important one. So this animation is going to take you through in the settings where you need to click through in the flow to further secure your account with password reset protection and also 2-factor authentication. So if you don't have 2-factor authentication switched on yet, we really would recommend it. It's just the easiest way to add an additional layer of security to your account, and to make sure that you're really setting yourself up to have as strong a security as possible on that account. So if you just click through, it'll take you through where to do this. And there's a few different options as well on 2-factor authentication. You can, I think recently enabled the possibility or the option for people to use security keys as well, or you can obviously have the text message backup, or you can use an authenticator app as well. And with all of these, obviously as well, people do then think about, well, what if I lose my that I'm using as my my second factor of authentication? We do also have the option to have a backup code in there. So as long as you have that, you should also be able to or have another layer of security and know that you will be able to, as an authentic user, get back into your account. All right, next slide, please. Oh, we'll go through the animation again. It's a very important factor, so can never watch it too many times. I never get sick of it. Safety mode. So I've included this one in here, even though we are still in a testing phase, but it's a very exciting new feature. And we are continuing to expand on the trial, learn from our early beta and trial users to make this as useful a tool as possible as we continue to expand on it. So safety mode is currently in development, but what it is basically an option for an account holder, someone on Twitter, to toggle on safety mode. And what will happen then is that they will have the replies that are coming to them, or the mentions coming to them, automatically scanned for harmful language or repetitive kinds of replies, uninvited replies, and it will automatically block those accounts. So it's taking the burden off the individual to necessarily have to go through and be blocking all of those accounts, or blocking those accounts when they're under a period of increased attention and scrutiny. So as we'll see here as well, it'll give you the list of the auto blocked accounts. So you then will have the option, if you want, to unblock them. You'll be able to review and see what those are. And you'll also be able to set the time limit for how long you want safety mode to be in place. So as I said, this is in early testing phases, but we are learning a lot, and we will continue to expand on it. So please do keep an eye out at Twitter Safety or our other channels, and we will continue to update general audiences as this gets expanded and rolled out to more users. Next slide, please. That's it from me today for now. So I'm going to hand over to Ben from our comms team, who's going to tell you a little bit more about working with Twitter comms, and I will hand over to him.
Thank you so much, Tahlia. Hi, everyone. I'm Benjamin, head of comms for Twitter Australia and New Zealand, and my pronouns are he and him. So as you've heard from my colleagues about how to maximize your time and experience on Twitter, I think we are ready now to talk about how you can kind of work with us, with the comms team, and how we can make your life easier. Moving on to the next slide. So these are some of the areas that we can definitely help you with, including pulling out local data. This can include what are some of the most popular retweets, the most popular hashtags, what are some of the keywords that are trending during key moments, whether it's during Mardi Gras, whether it was the latest episode of Maths. We can definitely pull out the necessary information as per your request. Because we sit on a wealth of data, we're able to look at trends and conversation that may be relevant to your story. So at any given point of time, you want us to dive into a particular moment or a conversation, let us know. And we also understand that you work on multiple stories, and we would more than happy to put forward our spokesperson that we think would be a subject matter expert that would be able to help on that story that you're working on. We have teams across the world, and there will be definitely someone who will be able to add color to your story. So at any point, do not hesitate to reach out to us. Apart from that, surfacing content, we can always find trending tweets and conversations on Twitter. And as I mentioned, Twitter is a platform that serves the public conversation. And we want to ensure that what you are seeing are conversations and how they're evolving and what actually matters here for us in Australia. And something that is close to our heart is in regards to how we are always looking at improving and updating our products and policies. If you have seen a particular policy that has been changed or updated, please do not hesitate to reach out to me or to the team. We will be more than happy to address that query and see what needs to be done accordingly. At the bottom of the slide, you would see an email address. Please send all your media queries and requests to press@Twitter. Someone from the team, regardless of the time zone, would be able to address it accordingly. Moving on to the next slide. I think this is the slide that everyone would be wanting and waiting for. I think being at Twitter, anyone who's been at Twitter would know that verification is one of the most asked questions. And I thought that this might be a good time for us to kind of bring that up and share with you what this process is. So access to the application to request verification is now available to everyone globally. You would just need to head over to your account settings and get started. Here are some notes for you to consider when submitting your verification requests. Your account must be active with a record adhering to the Twitter rules. This means you must have a profile name and a profile image. You must have logged into the account in the last 6 months. From a security perspective, the account must have a confirmed email address or a phone number, and the account must not have had a 12-hour or 7-day lockout for violating the Twitter rules in the past 6 months. So this is just the general steps or notes that you should be looking to as a personal user. For news organizations and journalists, there are certain additional steps that you should look into. Number one, your account should be public. That means none of your tweets should be protected. Your account bio should refer directly to the news organization's name and to the official URL of that organization. For individual accounts of journalists, you must provide a link to their affiliated news organization website and references to their work. So the reference could be an about page or your bio on the website itself. And based on that, the team will look into it and kind of go through the necessary steps on approving the verification process. Now, before I wrap up, and if we could move to the next slide, I just wanted to kind of take us through some safety and security checklists and tips to make sure that your account is always protected from compromise or hacks. I wouldn't necessarily go through all the points that you see on the screen at the moment, but I will want to highlight a certain number of them. Number one, please ensure you are working with a strong and unique password. I'm sure you would have heard this multiple times before, but please do not use the word or the term password as your password. Do not use your pet's name as your password. Make sure that it's unique and it has multiple characters and numbers to make sure that it's strong. And as Tahlia mentioned, please enable two-factor authentication. This extra layer of security will just make your life better. It will only ensure that you and only you have access to your account. The other point that I just want to make or bring across is we are all guilty of this. We all get links directed to our DMs or emails, and sometimes we just click on it. Please just review that link before clicking it. And if by chance you click on that link and you're directed to a page that resembles the Twitter login page, please do not enter your username and password on that website. Instead, I encourage you to go back to the main twitter.com page and log in directly there. If you're unsure, please do not click on the link at all. The final point that I would make is do not share your password with anyone. Twitter will never ask for your password, so please do not fall to such claims from acting verified accounts or random DMs saying that they are from Twitter and asking for your password. That will not happen. We always want to make sure that your password and your account stays true to yourself. On that note, I will pass it back to Tahlia for the Q&A session.
I was muted. Thanks, Ben. So thank you as well for sending in your questions. We do have about 10 minutes now, so we'll try to get through as many of them as possible. The first one I have here, I think is one for you, Rose, which is what are some tips for best practice engagement with audiences in spaces?
Sure thing. Just trying to start my video here. There we go. Great questions. So if you're looking to engage with people on spaces, I guess the best advice we could give you is to plan your space ahead of time, if it's possible. Schedule it and then tweet about it. Tweet about it every day until it's scheduled, so that you're reaching the maximum amount of people, and they can then plan to join that space when you've scheduled it. And then something that might seem pretty obvious, but when you're in the space, people will want to speak with you in the space. So it's probably a good idea to explain to people how to do that. So by clicking on the microphone, they can request to be a speaker and that you will accept one by one or however you want to do it. So just by explaining that out loud to people, then you might get more people sort of requesting to do so. And then one other piece is when you are in your space, Twitter will prompt you to send that via DM to people as an invitation to join. So if you had a list prepared ahead of time, okay, so I want to, DM these people ahead of time, then yeah, they'll get a ping and they might join. So I guess those are the tips.
Thanks, Rose.
Right.
A question for Pete on moments, which is, sorry, I just lost the question immediately. How long is the turnaround to have a moment published by Twitter Curation? And once published, are updates possible?
Thanks, Tahlia. Yeah, great question. So yes, updates to a moment. Once you publish a moment, you can make updates. You just need to go back to the moments tab and you'll see a list of all your moments, and then there'll be an edit button. You can click, you can edit the title, the description, add more tweets, whatever you need to do. Turnaround time, when you send in a submission, you'll receive an automated response letting you know that it's been received by the team and is under review. We're currently unable to respond to every submission directly, but if you have any questions about moments that you've submitted, you should reach out to your partnerships manager. And in terms of turnaround time, it depends on the day, the bandwidth of the team, but if you don't see your moment in the guide in the Explore tab within the day, within say 24 hours, yeah, please feel free to reach out to your partnerships manager and flag that or ask any questions you have.
Thank you. Ben, I have a question for you also about turnaround times. What's the average kind of turnaround time involved with data or other press requests?
That's a really good question, and it actually varies according to the type of question or the request that's coming in. I'll be more than happy to kind of work according to your deadline and timeline provided, but I think it's really based on the conversation we can have together and see how we pull out the data accordingly, just because some queries may just require a basic stat and some queries may require us kind of diving into like X number of months. So it all depends on the query and the type of query that comes in.
Oh, there's a follow-up. Oh, okay, so we have two questions here about verification. The first one, I just put myself on mute. The first, they're actually both around similar topics. So Twitter verification has the category news organizations and journalists. Does that mean feature and lifestyle journalists generally wouldn't get the blue tick? And similar question, what proportion of verification requests get approved?
Sure. So in regards to the first part of the question, feature and lifestyle journalists can get verified as well. And again, if you are perhaps freelancing or if you're an independent journalist and perhaps you're not linked to a particular news organization directly, as part of the process, what you can do is to submit 3 articles that you have written for that particular news organization or for the various news organizations and add that as part of your verification process. That will kind of help the team that is looking into it and would approve accordingly. In regards to what proportion of verification requests gets approved, I think as a team, the verification team, they always look into every request that comes in, and it's based on what's submitted and does it meet the criteria? So there is no real proportion that we're looking into. As much as possible, we try to verify everyone that requires a valid verification badge. Hope that helps.
Thank you. I have another question for Pete, actually, which is on what kind of topics tend to do best in moments?
Thanks for the question. So we get we see a variety of topics covered in moments, whether it's entertainment, sports, news, politics, memes. They all work well. I think it's more about kind of how you make the moment that has the biggest impact. So you want to make sure, as we know, people come to Twitter to find out what's happening. So you want to target content in your moments that relates to a news story or a conversation that's happening now. So make sure it's timely. As I mentioned in the presentation, you want to make sure you're kind of going beyond the headline. So making sure that you're showing content that people can't necessarily get from other sources to add more to a conversation that's happening. And then the best moments include only on Twitter content. So you want to kind of harness the content that's available only on Twitter. So the conversations, the videos, the from the source information, the memes, the things that your audience can't get anywhere else.
Thank you. We do have a couple of minutes left. So if there are sort of final questions to plug in here, please do. One question has come through specifically around the Twitter app, which I will take directly. So some of the features that I'll read it out. So some of the sections of Twitter you're talking about do not appear to be accessible on my Twitter app. Am I better using Twitter on proper computer, desktop, or do I just need to update my app? So this is a really good question. Some of the features that we mentioned today were things that are either in trial at the moment, so they aren't necessarily accessible to every single person on the app yet. So it could be a case of that it's still just waiting to be rolled out to sort of general use, or it could be that you do need to update your app. I would say that a lot of the time we actually have the most tools available on the up-to-date app. And there are limitations on certain things actually when you're using desktop. For example, when Rose was speaking about spaces earlier, she mentioned how it is actually listener only on spaces if you're on desktop at the moment. So you would only be able to join as an audience member, not as a host or having any of those sort of capabilities if you're on desktop. What I'd recommend is that you do update your app there and see what might be available once you do that. But if you do have any other specific questions about individual features that we've mentioned today, we did have those emails on the last slide where you can get in contact with our teams as well for specific inquiries, and we can help you troubleshoot or give you a little bit more information from there as well. All right, we do have a question. 1 second, just give us a minute or two here. There is so we've got a good question here actually about Twitter threads and whether there will be the possibility or the availability to schedule threads. I'm going to be completely honest with you, is that we don't have that information to hand right now, but it is a good question. So we're going to take that away. And if you do want to just drop us a line at one of those emails, we'll be able to get back to you with more information. And I'll also pass that on to the team at the Walkleys once we do come to an answer on that one. And we'll include it in some of the follow-up links that we do give to the Walkley team that will be sent out in the newsletter after this. But I'm glad to hear that you love threads. I love threads too. And I will just say one quick one as well, if anyone doesn't know it already, that if you are doing a thread and you include a link, like the URL to another tweet in your thread, that quote tweet will show up in your thread. So you're able to actually include quote tweets in that way in threads as well. So that's just another little tip. All right, unless there are any other questions, that's what we have time for today. Thank you so much to everyone who joined us. We hope that you got something out of this. We will be hosting another of these sessions in April with a focus on elections and using Twitter for reporting during the election cycle. It should be a really fun one. So we hope that you're able to join us for that one too. In the meantime, thank you again to our hosts at the Walkley Foundation, who are a fantastic partner. We're really, really proud to partner with you on this series of workshops. And we hope to see you next time. Thanks, everyone.